Hello, I'm James from the Leaning Institute. Today I want to talk with you about one of the 7 pillars of what I call the Sarvis system, and it's called family lines. Family lines is a tool that I've discovered and I've developed it. It's taken me many years to get to the point where I can share it with you. It's a very powerful tool that affects every person, because here's what I discovered. Every child is born on a parent's line called family lines. And I'll explain why it's called family lines. Most of us who have children or grandchildren or either siblings know there's a difference between how a child's relationship to a parent is. And we felt that. And family lines produces in a family either boost or baggage. Most of the people that I deal with and I talk to are carrying around baggage caused by their situation with their family lines. So what you're going to find out today is it's going to give you an understanding of how it works. But I can promise you, what I'm going to share with you is not rehashed. This is not repackaged. You're getting to see something that is new, that you've never seen, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I'm gonna get into it and tell you how it works. But first, I developed this tool, basically for me, because I couldn't understand the relationship I had with my mother versus the relationship that I had with my dad. So family lines is like this. And where I came up with family lines, my background is a lawyer. And so one day I was explaining to someone and I used my legal pad to show how it worked. And so here's where it works. If you take any family and you just draw a circle and you put dad, and you draw another circle and you put it, let's say we put it in for mom. Now, let's say this is a young couple and they're expecting a child. Well, what I would tell a young couple is, or expectant parents, is that I want to go ahead and forewarn you, that child is going to be on one of you's line. One of you is going to be what I call an online parent. One of you is going to be an offline parent. Now, these are terms that I had to come up with some way to talk about it once I had the concept. So when a child is born, and I think it might be good to look at, I'm going to use, say, Prince Harry, King Charles, and Diana, and Prince William. Let's use their story. I find it's a pretty good one for you to understand. But as we go along, you can do this on your own. Because every time I show this to someone, every time I'm coaching someone, as I'm doing it, it's so simple, they will start applying it to their family. They will start thinking about their relationship, their mom and dad, their children. It depends on what age I'm talking about. So if we look at mom and dad in this case, using Harry and if we use this and I'm using Princess Diana and Charles, King Charles now, so when William, their firstborn, came along, William would have been on dad's line. So here we have William. And as we all know, 2 years later, I think it is, they had another son, Harry. And Harry's on mom or the late Princess Diana's line. Now, if I was talking to you for the first time, when I draw these lines, when I draw, say, mom and dad, you asked me about your family lines. First thing I would ask you is, okay, before I put these 2 lines on the board or on a piece of paper, how close are your mom and dad? How close are you and, say, your husband? Because this affects your children. So if I use Charles and Diana, the one thing that we know that this was not a close family from the very beginning, because Camilla was involved. There was always 3 people. When Charles and Diana, when when they got married, he already had a relationship. So mom and dad, in their case, was never close. So that automatically puts the children's lines farther apart. So, and the closest siblings and the most successful siblings are going to be when they're on the same line. Just look at the board and think of physics for a minute. If I was putting, say, sticks on the ground. Well, look how far apart William and Harry are. Look at the distance. You got mom and dad between them. So, but in their case though, William and Harry were never had a close bond. You'll find that in situations where that close bond were both kids on the same line, on mom or dad's line. Now, when we look at some of the most successful people, like Sam Walton, who built Walmart, he had a brother on his line. If you look at Chick-fil-A, Stuart Cathy, there was a brother on his line. And Walt Disney had a brother on his line. This is such dynamics in how it affects us. And family lines is going to always produce boost or baggage. And just this week, I've talked to several people. And every one of them is dragging around baggage from their family lines. And if we think of a boost, for example, real quick, so you'll get the point here, Taylor Swift is on her mother's line. Her mom and dad later divorced, but not when she was younger. So she got a serious boost. If we look at Michaela Schifrin, the downhill skier, she's the famous skier. I'm saying downhill, I guess all skiers are downhill. But she is one of the best examples of a family line boost. And so we have plenty of stories where people have the baggage. Think of Prince Harry, for example. When people have that baggage, a lot of times it will present itself as drugs or alcohol because of what's missing from that family unit. And I mention family unit because when a family starts off, it's like, think of it kind of like the shape of a football. It's a kind of a unit. They're all a family. It's not a team. But in this case with Harry and Charles, they divorced, so this line moved farther apart. So if we were to look at what happened after a while, I'm going to show you what I think it probably more resembles. So we're going to just say Charles, and way over here is Diana, because they went through a nasty divorce. So we still got William, Prince William over here, and so we got Harry over here. So now when mom and dad, when Charles and Diana went through a divorce, these lines became bright and they moved farther apart. You see what happens though, these boys move farther apart. Well, in this case, what got even worse for Harry, and you're going to find when I'm probably going to be more of an advocate for Harry than I am King Charles or William, and you'll learn why as I go through this. So now we know of the tragic accident with Diana. Now this is what family lines looks like now for Prince Harry. And if you've read his book, if you read any of the news coverage, we know of the struggle between Charles and Harry and how they're still separated by a wide gulf. But if you look at the situation with William, who's on Charles's line, William has never experienced anything like Harry did. Charles and William are close. William still has his dad. Look over at the lines here, who does Harry have? His main spirit charger, who was a great leaner, who was a great person, created lots of love, and she was on Harry's line. So think about that being cut off. But as you go in life to understand more of that baggage, think about what happened to Harry. Remember, the first thing was, he wasn't born into a tight family unit to start with. And then that unit, and here's what happens too. in most cases where you would have a single unit, when these families divide, instead of being one family together, you have what I call teams. Now you got Team Charles, and you had, say, Team Diana. And the problem with teams is that it's just like a sports team. Sometimes when families become teams, they fight each other and they compete with each other. And lots of times, unfortunately, there's a lot of unsportsmanlike conduct. And also, it's easier for Charles to lean to William or to give him a hug or embrace him than it would be Harry, because his energy is different. His DNA is different. These two share more of the same DNA is what I think. So for all of Harry's life, when he was just a young boy, when his mother was tragically killed, it's been this team, Charles and William versus Team Harry. Well, no one, think about pulling for the underdog. It's always at very best 2 against 1. But this is true in every family. And in my family, if you look at my family lines and what made me want to find an answer, because in my case, I was on my mother's line, and I could never figure out why I couldn't be close to my dad. No matter what I did, I just couldn't crack that. My dad was an honest man. He was a hardworking man. But that's not what builds a relationship. But what I had with my mother, I didn't have to work for. It was just a wonderful, wonderful thing, kind of like Taylor Swift and her mom. And I mentioned Taylor Swift because Taylor Swift got a boost. And it's also, see, our family lines is where we build our foundation. You know, I used to enjoy the Amish barn so much, and as I spent time with the Amish, I would just want to say, well, we've got to tear the barn down because the foundation. I thought, well, that's so sad. But it's just you just can't fix that foundation. So kind of an analogy for people when we have our children or us, we get our foundation from our family lines. Taylor Swift had a boost. She had a good foundation. She could build a skyscraper. As we all know, I know something about how they work, but it takes quite a foundation for a skyscraper. And I think of now that if you look at, let's say, P. Diddy's in prison right now, but you look at his foundation. If you look at the people that we know, the celebrities that say commit suicide, they're carrying this baggage, and this baggage though gets pretty heavy. And the problem with baggage, I just saw this case this week, and what happened was, there's a lady come from what I call leaner parents, come from a tight unit, but she married someone who husband didn't have that. Her husband didn't have that foundation. And after many years of marriage and children, even grandchildren, by talking to her, I could see she's still carrying his baggage. They're still together, but she's carrying his baggage. Her husband's still carrying his baggage. And their children are carrying that baggage, and the grandchildren are carrying that baggage. So what we're talking about here is so serious that, but the family lines can happen to, the best of families who don't realize that when a child is born, you might be, like in my case, when my first daughter was born, I was the offline parent. And I didn't know how to describe it. I knew there was a feeling that reminded me of my daddy. Like, what is that? I could feel her almost trying to pull away, like toward mom. The second child came along 2 years later. It was a different story. That child kind of frustrated mom, but I could put her on my shoulder and she would just relax and could go to sleep. That's what I'm talking about with family lines. But so when you have, here's how it works. if you want to see how this works quickly, Google Taylor Swift's story. Look almost anything you see. She's on her mother's line, no doubt. And her dad is the offline parent. So, but here's how that would look. So you used to have a close unit with them. So you got dad and mom. And this is how I believe. I don't know Taylor Swift personally. And you don't have to see the energy. So, but on here we got mom, we got Taylor, and Taylor has a brother. And I believe both of them on the same line because they're close. If you look at some of the, let's say like Elon Musk, for example. Elon Musk is no doubt in my mind, all three siblings are on mom's line. They're close, not on dad's line. These things make a difference. So when Taylor spends a lot of time with her mother, the online parent can serve as let's go back to teams again. This is the good part about it. And I am still amazed at how much it does resemble teams. But Taylor's mother was always her coach, her best friend. Those are her words. The role of an offline parent has to be the cheerleader. I spent time with the Amish and I brought peace to families by telling a dad, the reason you're having so much problem with that young boy, he's on his mother's line. And when you give direct instruction or try to teach a child what to do that's not on your line, there's always, for some reason, kind of a blowback, an energy. They just don't want to receive it. And I believe that's true the other way around. When children get older and they try to tell an offline parent something, it's basically the same way. They really don't want to hear it. And I think it's because the DNA that's shared by people on the same line. Mark Twain was one of the smartest people that I've read, an American author, but he talked about there was nothing closer than his wife and one of the daughters. And he also mentioned her dad, how close his wife was to her dad up in Elmira, New York. So people been using these terms, but until I discovered this, and it really is so simple that I'm sure already you're seeing what I'm talking about. Most people, as I said earlier, that when I start talking about it, I'll see them kind of drift off to like, yeah, I know now why I'm not close to my sister or my brother. I know now, oh yeah, I see now, I was close to mom and not dad. Or they may talk about grandparents, or they may say, well, this is why grandmother gave the farm to one of the kids and left the other ones out. It goes back to family lines. If we interject how it works too with family lines, most of the rich people were on their dad's line. Now why? It's not because women weren't as smart or successful, because men control the wealth. People don't like to give across family lines. In other words, the dad, it's just easier to give to a child that's on your line. For whatever reason, teams don't like to support and give it to each other. We do that, I'm just saying it's not as easy. And I could spend an hour or two giving you examples of someone with money. You got a young boy, a dentist comes to mind, a young boy, and the dad makes good money. And got a teenage kids. Say a girl is 18 now and a boy is say 16. The boy gets everything. She has to work for everything. Dad controls the money. The boy's on his line. That's an example of what I'm talking about. If you look at one of the examples for you right now, President Donald Trump is on his dad's line. And it's easy to take a minute of research. You would see that. He had a brother, Fred, was on his mother's line. What I'd like to see people do about family lines that I'm not able to do, I don't have the resources, because I've interviewed people all over the country, and it's taken me probably 40 years from the first time I started asking the question, what is it, to be able to stand before you now and say with confidence, this is how it works. And this will apply to your family. And what it does, like, I mentioned Prince Harry a while ago and William, what I've seen it do, watch people just be able to drop some of that baggage, immediately. because they realize, oh, so it's not Dad's fault. It's not my fault. No, that's just one of nature's secrets that's been revealed finally, that every child is going to be on a parent's line. And so what my goal is, I can't give you, remember, I'm from the Leaning Institute. So the tight unit is when all the family members are leaning at each other, when mom and dad are leaning at each other, and the kids are seeing that. That's what creates a family unit. But when you take that and go the other way, then you start creating the baggage I'm talking about. So what the purpose, my goal is that going forward, because I think that this has reached a point of, now you've got people saying we need more children. No, we need to stop. The family line baggage in America is almost, I would think, to a national security issue, because the people that are on drugs or alcohol and the really problems and the mental health issues, I can almost assure you, almost all of it goes back to your family lines. But I really do have faith in people. I actually have faith in King Charles, because I've seen him lean and hug people and say, oh, it's good for you. There was a rugby team where they wanted to hug him, and he did say, this is a healthy thing. If you read Harry's book or listen, he says, I'm always willing to lean to Dad. I want to reconcile. But King Charles, has got his own baggage. He just recently did, I can't remember exactly what it was, but he showed pictures of his sister, I think Princess Margaret, but they're on the same line, not the other ones. He's brought his own baggage. And so, as I said earlier, that baggage goes on like the local folks I've seen here or the tourists I've talked to. He's carrying his own baggage into that family. So he didn't know how to start with that, to create a family unit and how important that was. But now, if you think about what I did William a while ago on his line, William has got that baggage trying to raise his kids. But by now though, think about this. William knows he has like 3 children, 1 or 2 or 3. They may all be on one line. They may be on his, mom's line, be on dad's line. It could be a mixture. When I first discovered this, I can remember like a lady that I knew, and I knew immediately all 3 children were on dad's line. Now this is a good woman, and she raised those kids. She gave birth to them. But it seems to me, and it's like, oh, that's kind of cruel that she never got to experience having a child is on her line, being an online parent. Now the 3 children are close. And that brings up another point about family lines. We say the middle child's left out. If you've got 3 children on one parent's line, that middle child, let's say looks like this. You got 1, 2, 3, right? And let's just say it's mom. And that's child 1, 2, 3. This child, number 2 here, is a lucky child, because that person is always going to be close to 2 siblings. Always going to be close. And so it's a really special place to be in. But having a sibling on your line, it really is it's a special boost. So when you think of family lines and what the goal is being able to, here's how it works. All right, the child that's on your line, it's easier to lean to that child. It's kind of like magnets. That child's going to come to you more. It's going to come easier to make that connection. But what you have to do, like in Michaela Schifrin's story, Google that and you'll probably see, I think, the best example of mom and dad, the roles I'm talking about. Mom's a coach, dad was at the bottom of those ski runs, and he was over the camera. He was her coach, and they were so close. A beautiful family unit, the best that I can think of. So when you get, and that's where that love and that closeness comes from, being able to lean. But I say it's easier to lean to the person's on your line because of that connection. But what I would coach a parent who's an offline parent, you have to be cognizant of the fact that you need to be the one to make that effort. And as I mentioned earlier, As I mentioned earlier about Charles and Harry, you know that I was an advocate for Prince Harry. Well, it's quite simple. So here's the way it looked again. We'll put Charles back up here, King Charles and William and Diana and Harry. Well, if you think about it, little Harry was a baby. He came into this divide already. And so Charles, I think, as a parent who brought a child into the world, has the onus on him to be the one to lean. And because if you can't lean in, or if you're not leaning in, you're missing out. And so Charles is carrying that baggage, and I just wish that Charles could find the strength, because it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. Children who come from leaners in a tight unit, they don't hardly even hear what I'm saying, because except be careful before you marry someone who comes from a team that's fighting, because you're going to pick up a lot of baggage. But if the world could just see Charles, King Charles, be strong enough, because if you're not strong enough to lean, I don't think you're strong enough to lead. If the world could just see King Charles say, wait a minute, I'm a man, I'm strong enough, Harry, come here, you're still my son. I really do think that would just rip across the world to give an example to so many people, because we need that. And I'm sorry that the problems they have here, that we see, but it gives us an example. It gives us a really good example for me to show you what it's like, for family lines to have these teams and the baggage that's created. If you read Harry's book, The Spare, he's documented so many times about, he and William were not close. They were never close as brothers. So he was raised, he didn't have that family. And that's why they still fight. Think about it, if you read about it. These boys have actually had, shoving matches, which is really sad, because you can only imagine, though, Harry's life would have been so different, because he would have been lucky if he was to be on Princess Diana's line, because she leaned to everybody. She brought leaning moments to the castle. But that family, if you look at it, they've dealt with tragic family lines, and there's such a history of it. And William, I don't think it's ended out. Look at the energy of his family. William's having to deal with it. But what they're trying to do, and I'm hoping this too reaches them too, because they may be royalty, but like an Amish friend told me one time, an older gentleman, he said, James, we're people first. Well, think about Harry. You call him Prince Harry. He was a little boy one time. He's a man, but inside is still that little boy who's hurting. Believe it or not, in King Charles is still a little boy who's hurting. That's the baggage I'm talking about. So what I'd like for you to do is to, and you can do this better. This is something that I've developed, but believe me, people can do this better than I can. I'm not the speaker. I'm not the person to spread the world. I'm more of that philosopher who searched, like Einstein said. When people are sleeping, I've been searching for answers. There's not a day since I was a little boy that I haven't looked for answers to figure out what's going on. So when I came up with this concept, I didn't even have words for it. I just started seeing it. Wait a minute, there's something going on here. But then when I got real lucky one day, I took a legal pad to try to show someone on a piece of paper how it worked. That's where the lines came in. But I've done this all over the country. I've done this with so many times. But as soon as I use the term family lines, everybody can figure that out. It's not complicated at all. Because the work, remember I started off calling this something, I'd say kind of fancy. But it really is so important. I called it one of the 7 pillars of the Sarvis system. This, along with six other concepts like this that I've developed, can change lives in just a few minutes because it's so basic that I call it like the house in the woods. In other words, we probably all experienced this. We've traveled down a road many, many times, and you've traveled the same way, looking in a direction toward the woods or whatever. But in one day, for whatever reason, you see a cabin in the woods. And you think, I never saw that cabin. Well, think about this. Once you see the cabin in the woods, you can never unsee it, which I think is remarkable about family lines. I didn't create the cabin in the woods. I just one day saw something and I said, there's a cabin in the woods. So I don't even know how much credit I should take for that. I developed family lines, but the concept I'm talking about, nature's been there forever. I think as long as the first person is born was on someone's line, and it never changes. So family lines, though, affects every human being, everyone. And it's so important if you're young parents now, and I see this struggle, especially if you have a young teenager, like, I don't understand, I just can't be, I don't know what it is. Well, take a peek at family lines. That might give you some answers, because once you can relax and say, oh, I understand now, my son or my daughter is on dad's line or on mom's line. And the way you want to do that, lean more to them, relax, but especially keep your family unit as tight as you can. And also, unfortunately, I think there's like 40% of marriages end in divorce in America. So divorce, or in cases, the worst case of murder, are the brightest lines where you'll know whose line somebody's on. And only in all the many years I've tested and did research and been out into the back roads and cities and doctors, professionals, I've only seen just like 3 or 4 times when someone struggled to tell me whose line they're on. Well, I know what that is. It's real simple. Mom and dad didn't argue. But I mentioned the divorce, like 40% of people marriages end in divorce. Well, divorce creates the teams, of course. There's going to be teams. Even Bill Gates, and Melinda's divorced, even they're old and super rich. Now, instead of a family unit, still teams. So what the secret is, though, if you want to, let's use Taylor Swift again. Taylor Swift, mom and dad divorced when she was older, but they're still close. They're still amicable. So Taylor still has mom as a coach and dad as a cheerleader. So if you want those lines to be bright, reduce that baggage, because it's not just a kid's baggage. If they're carrying baggage, you as a parent carrying baggage also. So remember, the goal is, before you have children, remember, our goal is to give your children a boost so they can have a foundation that they can build skyscrapers on. And not like, my opinion, say P. Diddy or Sean Combs, whichever name you use here. And it happens a lot. They'll try to build something, but then the foundation can't handle it, like the Amish barns that I spoke to. So your goal is you can't build a child's life. It's not possible. Think about how much energy Harry's put in over here, how much Harry's put into not having a foundation, trying to build a life. And there's ways that I can tell you to make that better, but I can't do it in this video. So you want to be sure that you eliminate as much baggage as possible. But what I found is just understanding family lines can help. Just understanding can bring peace, and bringing peace can reduce baggage. Thank you.